Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the ultimate college football preview talk show. There have been so many talking heads that are throwing out their opinions, but you really only need to listen to us. It's myself and the one and only Mr. 17K as of this week, JT Sports. He has been gracious enough to talk to all of us here about college football. JT, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing good, man. Hey, listen to Quincy. I heard a talking head on ESPN talk about Indiana should bench quarters work for this game in their biggest game ever. Insanity. Insanity. Don't listen to them. Listen to
No,
us.
don't. No. You don't have to do that. So, JT and I have three talking points for you today. Talking point one will be Indiana versus Ohio State. We're going to talk about all that game is going to entail, who you can expect to win, what you can expect to happen. Part two, talking about the other games in college football this week. Army Notre Dame will be a good game. BYU Arizona State, Florida Ole Miss. Those are all games that have a lot of playoff implications. And then the final part is going to be talking about different playoff scenarios, who should get in, who will get in. We have a lot of differing opinions when it comes to that, so it should be fun. If you're only interested in one of those three, I will put timestamps in the comments, so just click on whichever one you're most interested in. But we're going to start with the biggest game, unequivocally, in Indiana football history. They have to go on the road to play the Ohio State Buckeyes. They opened as 12-point underdogs. The line moved up to 13 and a half, Ohio State. Now it's back down to 12 due to a bunch of injuries and other extenuating circumstances. JT, what are your immediate thoughts on this game?
Yeah, well, losing Seth McLaughlin is definitely a huge loss to Ohio State because this is an offensive line that already was going in with plenty of question marks this season. Offensive guard position hasn't been good as expected. And with this injury now, it's so big because you got to move a lot of people around. You have an offensive guard that might have to kick out the tackle. You might have to play a few guys out of position. And the thing about Indiana in this game is that this is a pretty formidable defensive line. They may not be as big or athletic as what Ohio State is, but they are fundamentally sound. They play gap sound football. They're not out of position. They know how to get after you. Now, offensively, I really think that Indiana can have a lot of success throwing the football on Ohio State secondary. Their two cornerbacks have been up and down this year. Denzel Burke, he got torched for the majority of that Oregon game downfield. Curtis Warwick has been the best quarterback in the Big Ten this year. If we're going off efficiency, metrics, he pretty much clears everybody. And in a game like this, I really believe that turnovers are going to be very important. And who do you trust more? Curtis Warwick to take care of the football, or do you trust Will Howard? I got to go with Warwick. I just feel like in certain situations, Will Howard just has moments where he just goes complete Boo Boo the Clown, terrible situational awareness, like against Oregon. He had a pick six to begin that Penn State game. I like Indiana to pull off the upset, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah, because I believe that Indiana, with how well coached they probably are the second best team Ohio State has played this year. I will put them over Penn State because unlike Penn State, Indiana's receivers can get open. They can create separation. They can make big plays downfield. This is going to be a close game. I think it's a lot that Indiana covers whatever the spread is, whether it stays at 12 and a half or if it moves up or down. I love them to cover and I love them to win outright. I don't think the Ohio State Buckeyes understand what's about to come to Columbus. It's a storm coming, Quincy.
So I will be in Columbus for the game. I bought tickets like a month ago because I figured they'd be undefeated. Now, I want to talk about the two main points that you brought up. Ohio State center Seth McLaughlin will not be playing in this game. He tore his Achilles in practice, which is a terrible loss for Ohio State, especially since Simmons, their left tackle, already was out with an injury after that Oregon game. So then they had to retool their offensive line. their next game after they retooled that offensive line was their game against Nebraska. They had a bye week to prepare for that game against Nebraska. That was the game they won 21-17, and Nebraska had a lead in the fourth quarter. It was a really close competitive game. So then Ohio State, they fixed their offensive line issues. They started to play a little bit better throughout the season. And now you lose your star center who's been an All-American level talent this year. And let's center's the most important position on the offensive line. Everything, the communication goes from the inside out. So they have two options. It's either, I believe their left guard was their center last year. So they could either move their left guard to center and just put someone new at left guard, or start the backup center. Either one is not really an advantageous option for Ohio State. And Indiana, their defensive line, they stunt a lot. They run a lot of stunts. And I saw a guy bring up the point when talking about this game. He said, JT, who's the most dangerous rusher on any given play?
Me personally, for either team,
Just like position wise, like what?
edge and D tackle, mainly D tackle.
It's the guy the O line forgot to block. That is the most. So the point they were making is, yes, Ohio State's going to have these big athletes. They recruit well on the offensive line. It's the reps and the experience and the intelligence that's really going to come into a factor. And teams already haven't been able to run the ball against Indiana. They give up 2.5 yards a carry. That's first in the Big Ten. Secondly, the point about Ohio State's secondary. So Oregon, most of Oregon's offense is short dump down passes. They like to swing the ball to their backs a lot. And that's also something that Indiana likes to do. Oregon took the top off them. They decided they were going to go deep and attack Ohio State. And they found a lot of success doing that. I think you could expect Indiana to do the same thing. Now, the two things for Ohio State that they have going for them that really concern me is their defensive line. Michigan's defensive line gave Indiana a lot of problems, specifically in the second half. Indiana's their offensive line, you could tell they started to get a little bit tired. Kenneth Grant absolutely ate them alive in the second half. So Ohio State's D-line matching up against Indiana's O-line. It's a strong unit for Indiana. I think Ohio State is better in that regard. And also on offense for Ohio State, Jeremiah Smith and Ibuka are two great receivers, and it's going to be a challenge to cover them. Indiana has a terrific DB of their own, D'Angelo Pons.
Mm-hmm. True
He's
freshman
5'10".
All-American last year at JMU.
Great player. He's 5'10". I'm really interested to see that matchup because he's a little bit undersized. I think he can hold his own. I think it will be a challenge, though. I think Ohio State's going to have to go deep. So it's kind of interesting. Normally, games are won and lost in the trenches. I give the edge to both defenses over the opposing team's offenses. I think it's going to come down to just who makes a play late and who can get a turnover.
My biggest fear for Indiana is this going to be a game where Ohio State really plays their best football? Because outside of that Oregon game, I haven't really seen Ohio State play up to their capability. They spent $20 million on this team. When you budget in how much they had to pay to bring these guys back, pay for Chip Kelly, you bring in Quinshon Judkins, who has kind of been a little bit of a letdown, and Chip Kelly as your OC, or you got Caleb Downs too, Chip Kelly and him. So me personally, if Indiana can avoid Ohio State just saying, you know what, we're not about the, try to get flashy. We're just going to out athlete these guys. We're going to show that we're the better team. We're going to run it down their throat, because Indiana held Michigan to under 100 yards, which is impressive for anybody, because you know what kind of machine Michigan is up front, both sides of the ball. But for Ohio State, though, they haven't really been committed to the run as they should be. I saw them throwing like deep and goal balls on 4th and 2 against Northwestern, when it's like, bro, you paid all this money for Quinshon Judkins, you got Travion Henderson, run the damn football. So if Ohio State just feels, you know what, we don't really want to get into a passing display against Indiana secondary, we just rather try to impose our will up front with the athletes that they do have, even though they do have injuries on the offensive line. If there truly is a big talent discrepancy, then I believe that's Ohio State's best chance to win, because I don't think that throwing the football against Indiana is advantageous, because you're liable to have some costly interceptions from Will Howard. I don't see him playing a mistake-free game, Quincy.
I don't either. I think he's. I definitely think Rourke is the better quarterback. And you want to talk about that Michigan game? People were getting on IU's back because they struggled for the first time all year. They did not play a great game in the second half. They were up 17-3, kind of let Michigan back in the game. Michigan did not have a single drive. Other than their first drive of the game, they drove down and kicked a field goal. That was the only time they scored in the first half. Other than their first drive of the game, they did not have a single drive over 40 yards. Most of the reason that Michigan was able to stay in that game were some costly mistakes from Indiana. Curtis Rourke threw a bad interception on his own 10-yard line. They play calling wasn't that great in the second half of that game. Still, they found a way to win, and I think Indiana's coming off a bye week, which is huge. Every little thing you can point at. Obviously, most people are going to pick Ohio State. Every little thing that you're pointing to, it's adding up to give IU a better chance to win. I don't think it happens. I think it's going to be a really close game. The game being in Columbus is huge. If this game was in Bloomington, I'd be inclined to pick IU. I think it's going to be really close. I think Ohio State wins like a 24-20 type game. I think it's going to be really, really good, but I just think Ohio State's going to have, I don't think this is going to be a scenario where they come in and they're playing grab ass in the first quarter. I think they're going to lock in. They know they're playing a top 5 team. I think they will come in and play this game seriously. But I think Indiana's good enough to stay competitive in a game like that.
I really like Indiana because of the coach, and I really think if you can take Indiana from being a bottom feeder, only a basketball school for pretty much centuries, I don't see how Kurt Cincinnati doesn't move the needle for Indiana being able to win this one. Like, Ohio State fans already call for Ryan Day's job every time they lose a big game. They always say, "Oh, he doesn't know how to win the big ones." Well, it's like you own Penn State, you feel me? But when it comes to Michigan and everybody else, it's kind of like, you feel me? He does kind of have some tendencies where he can make some bad decisions in crucial moments. He can get a little bit flustered at times. Kurt Cincinnati, this man ain't no young head coach. He's up there in age. He's been around the block. He's seen a lot of football. He's coached a lot of football, and he's going to have Indiana ready for this game. And I truly believe that Ohio State, this is the second best team that they played. This ain't Penn State. You got an offense that has dynamic wide receivers. They don't really need to win this game running the football against Ohio State. I believe that with how their cornerbacks have struggled, that Indiana's going to be able to move the football slow, methodically, just throwing it at will against them. Curtis Rourke may have an interception, but I like Will Howard to throw an interception or two, because Ohio State, with their offensive line injuries and how hesitant they've been to run the football in certain moments where you just can't have enough confidence to pick up a 4th and 2, just running it for 2 yards. I really believe if Ohio State can't get that ground game going, then it's going to prove to be a big disadvantage to them. Plus, Indiana's the more healthier team.
So I say 24-20 Ohio State. You got a score prediction?
I'll go 31-28 Indiana.
All right. So it should be a really good game in Columbus. I'm surprised you picked IU. I did not think you were gonna go that way. So now let's talk about some other games. And the first one that I want to talk about has massive implications in the Big 12. And this is so College Game Day will be at Indiana, Ohio State. But a lot of people said they should have gone to this game instead because they thought it would be a really good environment. BYU versus Arizona State. BYU was undefeated, had the bad loss to Kansas at home, not a good look at all. And the committee threw them through the grave. They dropped from 6 all the way to 14. Now they have to go on the road to Arizona State, and the winner of this game will get a berth in the Big 12 title game, most likely against Colorado. Loser most likely out. JT, who do you like in this one? Arizona State is favored by 3.
Yeah, I lean Arizona State. I love me some Cam Scalaboo. Think of Christian McCaffrey, but just tone down the athleticism a little bit. This man has one of the all-time greatest names in the history of college football. BYU seemed like a team where they were good, but the way they were winning games, you were asking yourself, okay, how sustainable is this? They do have a really good defense, but their offense has kind of struggled down the stretch, especially against Kansas. Their quarterback isn't really all that great. He has a really awkward throwing motion. I don't know if you peeped that, but he just has a really unorthodox throwing motion. He's cocking that thing all the way back, kind of like Tim Tebow-esque. And the thing about Arizona State is that, defensively, they're not the greatest, but the big advantage that they have in this game is that BYU is a team that isn't really good in third down situations. They have literally one of the bottom 10 third down offenses in all of college football. So that shows you that their offense is more reliant a little bit on the big play than they are on consistency, being efficient, being able to move the ball, getting those 10, 5-yard gains. I believe with Indiana, similar to the matchup that they had with Ohio State, Arizona State, I think offensively, with how well they can move the ball, both passing and throwing, I like them to kind of be able to get up early on BYU and really force BYU to have to lean on that pass and try to get back in the game, which isn't really their bread and butter.
I agree. And Arizona State, they look like a completely different team now than they were at the start of the year. They had, I forget who they lost to. They barely beat Mississippi State, who's just an awful team. They barely squeaked by like a Texas State, but then they started rallying and they took it to Kansas State on the road last week. I think this game comes down to pure momentum. One team's hot, one team's not. I think I like Arizona State and I like them to cover in that game. Next game, and this one is huge. Also, this has I think more playoff implications than the last one because most likely the Big 12 is just getting one team in, and it'll be whoever wins the conference. This game, a lot of people are saying it's straightforward and that they know who's going to win. But if this has the potential to throw a huge wrench in everything, and I don't think it's that unlikely. Notre Dame versus Army at Yankee Stadium. Notre Dame moved up to a 14.5 point favorite, but this is an Army team. They give up only 10 points a game, and they run a very old-fashioned style. They like to control the clock with the triple option. You got any? What do you think about this one, JT?
I'm expecting Notre Dame to roll because what's the difference between Army and Navy? You feel me? Like when Notre Dame
I
played
personally
Navy,
think Army's looked a lot better than Navy.
they have, but I don't really think the discrepancy between the two teams is just night and day where they're both running the triple option. You're going to have a hard time scoring points on Notre Dame if you just think that you're about to run that triple option all the way downfield because the issue with Notre Dame is not their defense. As a matter of fact, if Notre Dame makes it to the playoffs, they're going to have a really formidable defense. They're fast, physical, all three phases, and the secondary linebacker defensive line. Notre Dame can really get after you. We saw what they did early during the season to Texas A&M, and even if they were to run it back with Texas A&M again, Texas A&M probably has a little bit more success offensively, but Notre Dame's defense is for real. If Army's going to win this thing, they're going to have to at least be able to get the 20 points. They're going to have to get a little bit more creative with their approach. They're going to have to kind of throw the football a little bit when Notre Dame doesn't expect it. And offensively, Notre Dame has hit their stride. I'm still not a big believer in Riley Leonard, but he's like a poor man's Daniel Jones because he is a really good athlete. He doesn't really throw the football that efficiently, but you're going up against an Army team that even if your offense does struggle, your defense will give you enough time to get you back into the game. And they also did force a lot of turnovers against Navy as well. I just feel it's going to be really hard to see an upset occurring just with the style of Army's offense.
I think you bring up a very good point that I kind of didn't really think about, which is the fact that they know how to defend the triple option since they already played Navy. Now, I do think Army is a lot better than Navy. I'm going to throw out a few reasons why I think Army maybe could pull this off. One, they're coming off a bye week, which I think is huge in a game like this. They get it basically at home. West Point is in New York. This game's being played at Yankee Stadium, so it is a de facto home game for Army. Even though I think a lot of Notre Dame fans might make the trip, and I think they do get a little bit more creative on offense. Their quarterback 7 touchdowns to 1 interception throwing the ball, so they have the ability to throw it if they please. I think Notre Dame will win. I think Army covers though, and I really like their defense. I think Navy, when you looked at them, they were giving up a lot more points than Army has. I think this is a game Notre Dame wins like 21-10, 21-13. I think it's close, and I think Army's going to be in it come the fourth quarter.
I like Notre Dame in an absolute route. I like them 42-10. I feel like if this game is going to be close, it's going to be 14-13, 14-10, maybe like 17-13, because I really do have a hard time believing that Army's going to be able to put up 20 in this game on this unit with how good Notre Dame's defense has been all year. They got one of the best defense in the country. They got a lot of guys who are going to be playing on Sundays as well. And just with their offense, man, I just don't think it's a really good matchup because, first of all, Notre Dame's run defense is 39th in America in rushing yards per game allowed. And although Army does have the best rushing attack in college football, you got to be able to switch it up against Notre Dame. You got to be able to throw a curveball. You got to be able to throw it moving. You got to be able to throw the football at least effectively enough where it's like, okay, we don't have to overcommit to the run anymore. We know that they're liable to throw it when they want to. And that's the problem I have with these service academy teams. It's just like you're just too predictable. It's like if you're going to run the football for over 300 yards against Notre Dame, you must have the best offensive line in the country. Because if they do that, Quincy, then that's pretty much what that means. It's just that with Notre Dame this year, they've shown that, yeah, they may lose to NIU, but they'll get up for the big games. And ever since then, they've been playing some good football. If if Army's going to stay in this game, their defense really has to play well. You got to stop Riley Leonard on the ground. You got to be able to force a few turnovers, and you got to be able to keep this a low-scoring game. Because if you keep this a low-scoring game, hey, who knows? Army is capable to break off a big run at any moment. You feel
See,
me?
that's why I have confidence in Army to keep this game close, is because I don't think their defense is bad enough to where Notre Dame will get to 30, 40 points on them.
But the thing is, it's like if we get into a game where both offenses are struggling, eventually you're going to ask the question, does Army have the depth? Do they have enough guys to keep rotating in? Because eventually one of these two's defenses is going to end up getting worn down. They're going to end up getting tired. And that's when you can really end up getting those body blows.
That's true.
So I'm not counting out Army being able to win this game. It's just really you got to play your best game all season. You got to throw out all the tricks in the playbook. If you got trick plays that you haven't used yet this season, bring them out. You feel me? If you got some unique passing plays, because the thing that fascinates me about the option is that when they do throw the football, it kind of is the equivalent to a trick play because they're really
Yeah,
crafty
it
with it.
is.
So I think this has to be a low scoring game where if it's 10-10 going into the fourth quarter or Notre Dame's up 13-10, Army's in striking distance to win. They got to be able to keep this a close game because if Notre Dame gets up 2 possessions at any point, I think it's kind of over. So I like Notre
I
Dame.
agree. I think especially since the way they play, to where like you don't have like they like against North Texas, they ate up a whole quarter on one drive. So I think like while that's good in pulling off upsets, you can't really play from behind. I think Notre Dame wins, but I think it's close. Next game, 2 more games I want to talk about. This one's caught my eye as a potential upset alert. Top 5 team going on the road to a pretty good bowl eligible team. Penn State at Minnesota. Penn State opens. They opened at, I think it was 12.5. We're now down to 11.5 in favor of Penn State. This is a team, I mean, Penn State was ranked in the top 4. They lost to Minnesota a few years ago. Minnesota's a team that is a lot better at home than they are on the road. JT, do the Gophers have what it takes to pull off this upset?
I like Penn State. My problem with Minnesota is that I really don't like their passing attack, man. It's just they just don't have good quarterback play. Ever since Tanner Morgan left, the quarterback play has just been, and you feel me? Last year you had Cock Manis, who's been decent at Rutgers, but I like Penn State, although I expect Minnesota to cover because we saw Wisconsin give Oregon a scare on the road. I think the same thing could happen to Penn State because one thing about Minnesota that I do like about them is that they do have a really good defense. And against the pass, they have one of the better pass defenses in all of college football. And Penn State's biggest problem offensively is that you really only got Tyler Warren, and that's about it. The rest of the receivers can't get open consistently. They struggled with drops. You know, if this is a game that Penn State gets shut down on a run and they got to rely on Drew Aller to throw it 30, 40 times, this could be an upset. But if they're able to run the football with Nicholas Singletary and their other phenomenal running back that they have behind them, I could see them winning this one and not really having to worry about a scare, although they probably win it by 10 or less. But for Minnesota, I need to see more out of their passing game, and I think they're one of those teams that they're so committed to running the football because you don't really have competent quarterback play. So I like Penn State to win 21-13. It's like I could see Penn State, struggling for the first 3 quarters and then they pull away in the fourth quarter. But for Minnesota, you need more out of your quarterback. You need him to play his best game of the year.
I'll give you a few points on why I like Minnesota in this one. I'm not going to go so far as to pick them yet, but there are a few things about them that I like. The first one, Penn State has not played well on the road this year at all. They struggled and really should have lost that game to USC. They needed a miracle last second drive, and other than that, they haven't really played that many games away from Happy Valley. They did have a good win over Wisconsin. Other than that, I think they're a completely different team when they're on the road. Minnesota is coming off of a bye, which is huge, and they lost their last game to Rutgers on the road going into the bye week. I think that's a case of them looking ahead. I'm not putting too much solace in that Rutgers loss. I think they're like, all right, Rutgers is easy. We're going to only focus on Penn State. They slipped up. But before that game, they won 4 in a row. This is a team that I think is really going to be prepared well. And while, yes, I don't think their quarterback play is that great, look at Brosmer's stats for Minnesota. 2,200 yards, 14 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. You look at Drew Aller, 2,200 yards, 16 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. I don't see an advantage either way in the quarterback department. I think Drew Aller is incredibly overrated. I think Penn State as a team is incredibly overrated. Mm-hmm. What's going to come down to who wins this game is who can run the ball, I think. Because I don't think either one of these quarterbacks is good enough to take over a game and win it by themselves.
Well, here's the thing. I don't mean to cut you off. But what helps Drew Aller over Max Brosmer in this game is that anytime Brosmer has went against a good defense, he struggled. His best performance of the season was when he threw 4 touchdowns against Maryland. We know Maryland isn't good, but when they played against USC, whose defense was solid, he had a subpar game. They didn't ask him to do too much. Against Michigan, he wasn't that great. Against Iowa, he wasn't that great neither. You see, although I do agree with you that Penn State is overrated, so is Drew Aller. They got Tyler Warren. That's a dude. I mean, I was watching them against USC. This man was catching the ball damn near every play. He's like Taysom Hill at tight end. Pretty much you can put him at running back, receiver. I wouldn't be surprised they run him a little bit at quarterback too. Like, what can't this man do? You feel me? And if Minnesota has a game plan to stop him, if you want to triple team him, quadruple team him, take him out the game, then I love them to pull off the upset. You feel me? But it's hard to stop that monster, Tyler Warren. Wouldn't you agree he deserves some Heisman love?
I think if you want to put him in a top 10, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to that. I mean, 808 yards, 5 touchdowns on 67 catches. That doesn't even take into account what he does running the ball. I think Minnesota. I have confidence Minnesota will have a game plan for him though. I think I really like Minnesota in this one. I think this is a game 3:30 kick. I think Minnesota, their fans will get up for this one. I think I think the signs are pointing for Minnesota to win this one. I think Penn State, I think they're due for a slip up. I just think they are. I'm not confident in Penn State at all. I think they're gonna really feel the pressure when they come into this game. I want to pick at least one upset this week. I think Minnesota's the best equipped to do that. Last game I want to talk about that really has big implications. We could go quick on a few. I don't know. There really aren't that many great. Well, there are some good games, but other than this next one, there aren't really many that are sticking out to me. This is one that I think has a chance to screw up a lot of things in the playoff, which we're going to talk about after this game. Ole Miss at Florida. Florida just picked up a huge win over LSU. They've started to turn a little bit of a corner this year. Ole Miss cannot afford another loss. They already sit with 2-2 unranked teams. If they want to make the playoff, they got to win out. Does Florida have a chance to knock them off in the swamp?
Absolutely. You see, one thing about Billy Napier, he always has Florida ready to play in these big games. Now, the Texas game, I don't put too much stock into it because Florida was undermanned in that game. They didn't have their quarterback. They had Cormani McLean out there starting that corner. You feel me? So they were down the third stringers in that game. They're more healthier now than what they were a few weeks ago when they lost to Texas and Austin. However, I still like Ole Miss to win this one because Ole Miss has one of the best defensive lines in all of college football. Yeah, they bought most of them out of the transfer portal, but it worked. They can get after you, rushing, getting after your quarterback. They can stop the run. And DJ Lagway, he's decent as a true freshman, but he's not a really good passer. He's really streaky, where a lot of Florida's offense, if they move the ball in this game, is going to be heavily dependent on the big throws downfield. If he can get a couple of 40, 50-yard bombs downfield to flip the field, then Florida has a good chance being able to score. But the thing is, I don't think he's consistent enough for Florida to be efficient enough offensively to move the ball against that Ole Miss defense, because normally Florida wants to run the football down your throat. And Ole Miss, they've shown that they can stop the run, they can stop the pass. So it really comes down to DJ Lagway, how good he can play. But ultimately, I like Ole Miss to win because they're a way better team than LSU.
I do. I agree. I think Ole Miss will win. I don't know about way better than LSU because LSU did beat Ole Miss, but I
Well,
do think Ole Miss will win. I think Ole Miss is also a team. They've looked a lot better since their loss to Kentucky and LSU because I think they were unranked for a portion of the year. They did not look good, but since then they look like a wagon. Now, I've talked about the bye week and how it helps out a lot of teams. Obviously, you're gonna look better coming off of a bye week as opposed to not. And Ole Miss is coming off of a bye week after that win against Georgia. I feel like we could see a little bit maybe of a hangover game because that was such a massive win over Georgia. Ultimately, though, I agree with you. I don't think that Florida. I think Ole Miss's D line is going to be too strong, and Florida won't be able to run the ball. So ultimately, I do think Ole Miss will win.
Here's
And,
what makes Ole Miss a better team than what LSU is.
I mean, I
I
think they're better.
call
I think they're better. I think they're better. I don't think they're like night and day better.
if the difference about this Ole Miss team compared to LSU is that LSU beats themselves. That's
That
why I
is
picked
true.
Florida
They
to
do.
win. Like every game, it's the same situation. You come out of halftime, third quarter, and Garrett Nussmeier becomes Santa. You feel me?
That
Fumbles,
you're right.
interceptions. Ole Miss, you can trust Jackson Dart a lot more than you can trust Garrett Nussmeier. Now, the thing about that Ole Miss LSU game is that was probably LSU's best game of the season. And they really should have lost that game, but they were able to get a few tricks out of the hat, and they get into overtime, and they're able to pretty much win it off a couple of plays. But you know he was able to overcome his turnovers. The thing about Ole Miss is that with how good their defense is playing and the fact that they don't really beat themselves that much, Florida isn't going to get any extra possessions. They're going to have to maximize every time they touch the football, and you really need DJ Lagway to have a really good game. But I do think that Ole Miss, they are liable to lose this game because Florida is formidable at home. That's when this team plays their best under Billy Napier. But I think as long as they can take care of the football, they win this game.
I agree. So last third of the video, probably not. I'll probably be a little shorter than all those picks, but let's talk rankings. Now, this has been a big point of contention. Everywhere you've looked, people are this team should be in, this team should be in, this team should be in, this team should be in. And everyone, it seems like no one can agree on anything. Everyone values different things, but ultimately it only matters what the committee values. My first question is going to be: is there anything that surprised you or that you find intriguing from the rankings that were released on Tuesday? Because there wasn't a lot. There was some changes, not a lot. Is there anything that caught your eye what the committee's how they're ranking teams?
Yeah, man. I don't know what Missouri's doing to the committee. I don't know if they're extorting them or what it is, but they should not be in the top
I
25.
agree. I agree.
They got they've lost to every good team on their schedule, man. You are not one of the best 25 teams in college football. Don't know what the hell. My thing that irritates me the most, Quincy, is they keep talking about the eye test. Well, when we watch these teams with the eye test, this is what we see. What about the eye test shows you that Missouri is the 23rd best team in college football? What is it with the eye test that shows you that Texas is the third best team in college football? Listen, if we're going to harp on Indiana playing a weak schedule, not beating any ranked opponents, let's have that same energy with Texas, because when they hosted Georgia at home, by the way, after Georgia lost Alabama, it looked like Georgia was in wounded animal mode. That's when you thought Georgia was the most vulnerable. And this was right after Joe Clark called Texas the new Georgia. And what did Georgia do? They kicked their ass. You feel me? And they struggled against Vanderbilt. You can say, well, yeah, they had a pick six callback and this and that. Man, that was a close game. You feel me? Texas, for them to get in, they got to beat Texas A&M. If they don't beat Texas A&M next week, they have no business being in this thing. Penn State, okay, you beat Illinois, cool, but how impressive is that? You feel me? Like, I think that they're giving the Big Ten a little bit too much kudos in this top five. Penn State needs to be bumped down. Indiana, you should bump them down, and bump down Texas too. You feel me? If you want to put Notre Dame at 3, I get it. They lost to NIU, but at this point, it's like if we were just going to nitpick these teams, who has the better loss, who has the better win, like just go ahead and move Notre Dame and Alabama up. Because if the eye test is telling you that, Texas and Penn State and Indiana are this good, then the eye test should show that Notre Dame, Alabama, they should be ranked a lot higher because they have better wins. You feel me? Now, that's just my whole stance on this thing, man. I'm just getting annoyed with the whole eye test thing. You feel me? Because eye test is subjective. How they view these teams, me and you can view differently. It's all subjective. If you were to use strength of schedule and other metrics to determine who's the best teams in college football, we feel Indiana, Penn State, and Texas should be ranked this high because of what the metrics say, because of these data points. Understandable. You feel me? But if your whole argument is just based off the eye test, I think it's a weak argument.
So I don't really understand what they're trying to do here because I feel like there are some teams they have ranked high because of the eye test, and then they have some teams that aren't. Now, here is all that I've heard for the last so Indiana, they beat Michigan. They beat them 20-15. It was a close competitive game. Indiana wins, and everyone said, "Oh my God, this is so great for Indiana. They haven't won 10 games in a season ever, and they've won 10 games this year, nonetheless 10 in a row. It's so great, good for Indiana." And then all of a sudden, after their bye week, whoa, they're getting ranked a little too high. Who have they played? How about this? How about this? How about this? How about this? And it's all coming from the SEC. They cannot wait to bash Indiana as soon as they lose. And I'm wondering, where's that energy for Penn State? Where's that energy for Notre Dame? Where's that energy for Texas? Every single person, they are all jumping on Indiana. Now, there are two ways you could. Obviously, if Indiana beats Ohio State, they're going to go up to 2. They might even go up to 1. If they lose to Ohio State, they're in the camp with Tennessee and Georgia and Ole Miss and Alabama and Miami and Notre Dame. And everywhere I look, everyone says it's 50-50. You either think Indiana should be in because they're 10-0, they've waxed everybody, or they should be out because they won't have any good wins. Now, their strength of schedule is 100th. That will change when they play Ohio State. After they play Ohio State and Purdue, it's going to be ranked, I believe, in the 50s, which still isn't great, but it's not nearly as an eyesore of seeing triple digits in the strength of schedule column. My whole point is this. Of all the teams that are making noise behind Indiana, Notre Dame, Bama, Miami, Ole Miss, Georgia, Tennessee, I'll even throw BYU in there. The only team that I think has an argument is Georgia. Georgia got done so dirty with their schedule. Having to go at Bama, at Texas, at Ole Miss, home against Tennessee, that's crazy. I think Georgia with 2 losses, if you want to put them ahead of IU if they lose, I'm fine with that. Ole Miss lost to Kentucky. Tennessee lost to Arkansas. And Bama lost to Vandy. I just don't understand how they deserve to be ranked higher than Indiana if they lose to Ohio State. Now, I get it. The SEC is the best conference. No one's arguing that the SEC is the best conference. All of those teams, Arkansas, Vandy, Kentucky, IU would beat all those. And you can play the what-if game, the what-if game, the what-if game. But my whole thing is, the committee, you can see they're valuing, look at the teams that they have with 1 loss. Ohio State lost to number 1 Oregon. Texas lost to Georgia. Penn State lost to Ohio State. Of all those teams, they're valuing them high because they have a good loss. And they have Notre Dame lower because of the bad loss to NIU. They have Miami lower because of the loss to Georgia Tech. And obviously you have the 2-loss camp. I'm going to ask you 2 different things. Do you think Indiana should be in with a loss to Ohio State? And do you think they will? Do you think they should? And do you think they will?
I really believe it depends what happens with that A&M Texas game. If A&M wins,
very true.
I don't see Texas getting in. You really can't put Texas in because they don't have a ranked win. If you're going to harp on Indiana for the same thing, you got to have that same energy with Texas. You can't say, well, we should be in because our best wins are against Texas and Vandy. You feel me? That doesn't cut it. You feel me? And A&M, if they lose to Texas, you got 3 L's, you're already out. Now, for let's say, I really see a world where Indiana gets in because I don't really overreact too much because everything's going to play itself out. You feel me? You got a few elimination games. The thing with Notre Dame is that although the NIU loss is despicable, it's disgusting, NIU sucks, they do have some really good wins. You beat Texas A&M on the road in College Station. You feel me? You beat Louisville, who at the time was ranked, and you beat Navy, who was ranked, and you play Army, you feel me, who is ranked. So they do have a lot of quality wins as compared to Indiana. But I see a world where Indiana gets in because only one ACC team is going to get in. There's going to be a few SEC teams that people are making an argument for that, they're going to falter down the stretch. If you put Indiana in over a 2-loss Tennessee or 2-loss Texas, I wouldn't be outraged over it. As a matter of fact, I would be in favor over it. The problem really lies okay, if people are going to make this argument about Tennessee, you feel me? It's really going to come down to Tennessee with that second loss about them getting in. Are you really going to snub a two-loss Tennessee team over a one-loss Indiana team? You feel me? Or people are going to try to make the argument for Texas too because of the eye test. But I really don't have a problem with Indiana getting over one of those two-loss SEC teams, even both of them, as a matter of fact. You feel me? Because although, yeah, they played in the SEC, you can't use that whole well, the SEC's better argument when you haven't beaten none of the best teams on your schedule. You feel me? And if Indiana has only one loss and Texas has two, and you haven't beaten none of the quality teams, then that's a mute point. You feel me? You can't get mad at Indiana for beating the teams they were supposed to beat. You feel me? But you're going to use the argument, well, we beat Arkansas, we beat Vandy. That's not strong enough. You got two losses. Indiana has one. Therefore, they should be over you.
I agree. I think the only way Indiana gets left out is if they get completely waxed by Ohio State and they lose 41-3. And you know what? If that happens, I'm fine with them getting left out. They don't deserve to be in. I think at the end of the day, they will get in. Now, I know this game isn't this week. It's next week, but honestly, it's must-watch television, and I hope that they schedule the Indiana Purdue game not at the same time as the A&M Texas game because I'm so excited to watch that game. It's going to be
First time they played since 2011.
It's going to be a movie. Now, here's what you're looking at. If Texas wins, they move to 11-1. They make the SEC title. And if they lose the SEC title, they should be in. Now, losing the SEC title, that's another conversation I wanted to get into, and we can get into that next. But if A&M wins, that throws a wrench in everything because then you have 6 teams with 2 losses. You got Texas, Ole Miss, Georgia, Tennessee, Bama, and A&M. You got 6 teams with 2 losses. And then A&M would make the SEC title. And then it would go against another team, a 2-loss team. My first question is just this. Real quickly, who do you think wins between Texas and Texas A&M?
I like.
I'll tell you right now, I like A&M.
I lean Texas. I lean Texas. I do believe that Texas does have one of the best rosters in college football. And they did go on the road and destroy Michigan at that time. You feel me? When people still thought Michigan was good, I believe Texas is one of the best teams in college football from a talent standpoint. They just haven't had that signature win yet. And if you beat A&M, you get that. And A&M will have 3 losses.
I see. My whole thing is I think I agree with everything you say. A&M wants this game badly, and they get it at home. They're a new beast when they're at home. I know they lost to Notre Dame first week of the year. They waxed Missouri. They waxed to LSU. They're a new beast when they are at home. I'm liable to take A&M in that game.
My thing
Now, so
is, with Marcel Reed, as dynamic as what he is, my concern with A&M is their passing game. Texas does have a really formidable run defense. They do got a really bro. they got some meta humans on that defensive line. You feel me? Texas defensive line looks like what Georgia's defensive line looked during that stretch
they
2021.
got some big fellas.
Yeah, and A&M's offensive line has been a little bit up and down this year. But
I see
I
that.
want I want to get into your point about what happens if you have a 3-loss co-SEC runner-up.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. So you're getting this scenario where whoever wins between Texas and Texas A&M is gonna play for the SEC title. And the way the tiebreakers are forming, if Bama, Ole Miss, Georgia, Tennessee, and the loser of that Texas A&M game, of those 5 teams, they would all have 2 SEC losses. The team that would get in is Bama, based on my head was spinning when I was trying to figure this out. But it's Bama who gets in based on conference opponent winning percentage. And I think that's part of the reason Bama's at 7 and Ole Miss and Georgia and Tennessee are at 9, 10, 11. And here's the thing, and this is what Lane Kiffin was talking about. The loser of the SEC title game, if you go to the SEC title game as a 2-loss team, this doesn't apply for Texas if they win, but if you go to the SEC title game as a 2-loss team, you're either getting a bye or you're out, it looks like, because a third loss could be devastating. Now, my opinion is that a team in this 12-team format, it doesn't make sense to punish a team for making their conference title game because it proves you're better than the other teams. In the 4-team playoff, there are only 4 seats at the table. You kind of had to win your conference to get in. So I think that whoever loses their conference title game shouldn't get dropped a whole lot, if at all. But will they, is what I'm wondering. What do you think?
I don't think the committee wants to go down that route because if you leave out the loser of the SEC championship, I was getting into it with somebody on X about this. He was like, well, it pretty much is the equivalent to a first round game. I was like, no, bro. Like, you can't miss the SEC championship. You feel me? Duck it and get into the playoffs while the team goes into it, loses. Because Lane Kiffin said these coaches are scared. They don't want to play in the SEC title game
I mean,
because,
I wouldn't either.
and here's the thing, when they approved this 12 and eventually 14 team playoff format, the SEC and the Big Ten, they laid out 2 stipulations for them to put their signature on that paper. They say either we get 4 guaranteed spots or we get a higher revenue split. They went with the revenue split because everybody was against the guaranteed spots. Well, if the SEC gets left out because you leave out their co-champion or their runner-up, I see a scenario where the SEC says, you know, we're packing our bags. We're about to disassociate ourselves from the rest of college football because how are you going to penalize us from making it to our title game when you know how difficult our conference has been? Meanwhile, you're going to incentivize other teams for conferences not being as deep. And I don't think the committee wants to go down that route because when one of the members on the committee was asked about it, he was like, well, we're going to, you know, we're not going to demean the value of making it to a conference title game. So essentially, from what I've gathered from that statement is whoever loses in the SEC championship, you're still going to be good. I don't really think they want to go down that route, Quincy. I
Now,
really think the SEC
I'll
packs
give
their
you an
bag.
interesting point though. The most likely scenario for this conference title game will be Texas Alabama. Most likely. If Texas were to win, that puts Bama at 3 losses. So who's at the back of the pack of the 2-loss teams? It's Tennessee. Well, who won when Bama played Tennessee? Tennessee beat them. I think it's going to be I'm not so sure that it's that straightforward because I don't know, because
The thing
if
with
A&M
Bama
makes
though
it,
is
I think if
that
A&M makes it, it'll be hard to justify keeping them. And I
the
think
thing
it,
with Bama is that their schedule, they've beaten more ranked teams than what Tennessee has. The only thing Tennessee really has going for them is that Bama loss.
and I'm not
Al-
saying that Bama should get left out. I'm just saying it's a conversation that I think is going to end up happening.
But Bama's strength of schedule though is better than Tennessee's because they got better quality wins. The only thing Tennessee can say is that we beat Bama.
But then
Tennessee,
I think then you get an argument from Tennessee that says, "Oh, well, why play the games? Why play the games? We beat them."
but Alabama though, even though they lost to Tennessee, they beat Georgia, they beat Missouri, they beat LSU, they slaughtered LSU on the road, and they went on the road and destroyed Wisconsin, who only lost to Oregon by 3. And also, you made it to the SEC championship. You should be incentivized for making it to a conference title game. It's not like, you know, you're arguing for a 9-4 team getting in. You feel me? For
Yeah,
Tennessee, they had the
and I'm not even
opportunity.
trying to say that that's an invalid argument. I just think that Tennessee would have I think that's an
Oh,
argument
in
that
South
Tennessee can
Carolina,
make.
I forgot. South Carolina is a surging team right now. So that means that Alabama beat Georgia, you beat South Carolina, you beat Missouri, you beat LSU. That's 4 ranked wins. Tennessee only has one. So which matters more? You winning the head to head or the team that, yeah, you lost that head to head, but you got the most ranked wins in your conference?
Yeah, and I don't even think that's an invalid argument. I just think it's an interesting argument that is to be had. And but before we leave, I do want to bring up one thing to the people that are ragging on Indiana. Everyone has, from what I've told, is that the five best teams in the country are Texas, Ole Miss, Georgia, Tennessee, Bama. Those are the best
I
teams
think
going.
Tennessee loses to Vandy, Quincy.
Really that
Van,
that's
Van, Van,
I
people
don't know
keep
about that.
saying, well, Alabama lost to Vandy. Like, Vandy ain't no pushover this year.
They're not. They're not.
You feel
But
me?
they're FanDuel now. Who knows the most about college football? It's the sports books. They're always so close on these spreads. They always seem to know more than everyone else. Here, so I saw this from a guy that was trying to argue that the SEC team should get in over Indiana should Indiana lose. If so, from what I've heard, is these are the best teams in the country. No one can touch them. Here are the 4 projected spreads for the hypothetical games. So, like the bracket that they just released, if those games were to happen in December, here's what the projected lines would be: Ohio State favored by 21 over BYU, which is fair. Georgia at Penn State, Georgia minus 1.5. Ole Miss at Indiana, Ole Miss minus 1.5. Bama at Notre Dame, Bama minus 1.5. If they were so much better, those would be 7-8 point spreads.
Well, here's the thing with that. You got to factor in the home field advantage. I believe that gives you like 2.5 points. And plus, you got teams from the South going to play in really harsh weather climates that they aren't accustomed to playing in. You
Which I'm
know,
excited for. I think that's going to be great. Like
yeah,
that.
like I
That's always been the point of contention with the bowl games. The SEC is so good in all these bowl games. Well, they're played in the South. All of
yeah,
them.
and it's neutral fields. It's like you're not really playing in like cold, harsh weather where you could have a SEC team playing Penn State in the snow. It's a blizzard. You feel me? And I really do think that for everybody that complains we don't have parity, this is as most wide open that the national championship picture has been. You
Oh,
feel
for
me?
sure. For sure. And I think the final point I can leave everyone with is why is college basketball so close come playoff time? You got 5 players on each team. So the talent is spread out throughout the country to where there are a lot of teams that have a shot. That's what you're starting to see in college football with the NIL and the transfer portal. People aren't going to want to stay as a backup at Alabama for 2 years when they can start at a school like a
Yeah.
Tennessee or a Texas A&M or a Colorado or a Boise State. It's even the playing field a lot to where the top teams aren't so much better than everybody else. It's also you got a situation going back to the start of the video at Ohio State to where if this was back in the era maybe 6 years ago, Ohio State center's out. Oh, they got another top recruit that we can just plug in. That's been waiting for 2 years. That you can't do that anymore. All these teams don't have the depth. So I think it's great for the game of college football that it's more wide open. I think all these games are going to be a ton of fun.
And the sleeper team to look out for, believe it or not, is Colorado. If Colorado doesn't win the
I know
Big
how much you
12,
love Dion. I know how much
and
you
you
love
you
Dion.
you know before the season, I picked Colorado to win this conference and make the playoffs, and everybody called it crazy. My Colorado's the
I
best
called it
team.
crazy. I called it crazy.
Yeah, because like this was my thinking. You got 2 players that are probably going to go 1 and 2 in next year's draft. Most of the times, you don't end up, being anything less than a 9-win team. And Colorado gets the Big 12 the best shot to win a playoff game potentially because BYU is not playoff material. Neither is Arizona State. The difference between Colorado and the rest of the field is that not only do you have 2 of the best players in college football, arguably, but you also have one of the deepest receiving cores in college football as well. All of those wide receivers are going to be playing on Sundays next year. So Colorado kind of profiles a lot. I was listening to Joe Klatt talk about this, like that Marcus Mariota Oregon team. People question how good they were up front, but they could kill you on the perimeter. And really, they say matchups make fights. Colorado could beat Miami. Miami is Cam Ward centric. They could beat an Indiana team. You feel me? I think that would be a great fight. Now, if they got to play Ole Miss or Georgia, I don't really think that favors them. But at the same time, like Georgia hasn't been what they used to be up front. But if they got to play Ohio State or Oregon, a team that can just outright abolish them on the line of scrimmage, I don't really think they can go that far. But the fact that they do get a first round bye from winning their conference championship does help them.
So, another interesting thing to look out for is everyone thought, because the way this thing was set up was, the top 4 conference winners will get a bye, then the little guy will get the 12. Well, Boise State's higher than Colorado, so I think I don't think Boise State's going to get the bye, which I think is another interesting point. I went back and found, I made a bracket that I made.
I got a hot take for you that you're not going to like.
All right, hold on. Give it first, and then I'll give your take, and then I'm going to tell you what I had as the 12-team playoff.
Boise State doesn't want to see UNLV in a rematch in the Mountain West Conference.
I actually am with you on that.
UNLV has a squad.
I'm with you on that. Because UNLV barely lost to them.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be a good game.
I like their quarterback too. Like I don't think Boise State. I think their best shot to get in is if you play Colorado State for the Mountain West title game. I don't think you want to play a team like UNLV again, and UNLV is ranked. You feel me? So yeah. So if the Notre Dame Army game, because a lot of people aren't talking about the CFP scenario when it comes to the G5 squad that gets in.
No one's talking about if Boise loses.
Yeah, because I really believe that as good as what Ashton Jeanty and Boise State are, UNLV is just as good. They don't have a player of his caliber, but they got a lot of good players on that UNLV team. So UNLV, I like them in the rematch.
So I'll ask you this. If UNLV wins and Army has one loss to Notre Dame, who's getting that spot?
You're taking UNLV.
Because I feel like if
Tulane also.
Tulane, yeah. I think they would give it to Army if they keep it close against Notre Dame. I think that would look better.
I think Army also plays in the American. That's going to be a tough one.
Tulane. They're going to play Tulane in the conference title.
I feel like they would put in UNLV because of how highly ranked Boise State is.
Maybe. We'll see. Now, here's what I had as the 12-team playoff. I had Georgia at the 1, winning the SEC. I had Ohio State at the 2, winning the Big Ten. I had Kansas State at the 3, winning the Big 12. They're done. I had Clemson at the 4, winning the ACC. I thought I picked Florida State. Thank God I didn't pick Florida State. That team is in there.
Yeah, thank you. They might lose to Charleston Southern.
Charleston Southern has 1 win. I don't know.
Who do you think Florida State can beat, Quincy, with how bad they've looked? I wouldn't put them past anybody.
I don't know. It'll be interesting. I had Texas at 5, Oregon at 6, Ole Miss at 7, Penn State at 8, Alabama at 9. That's looking pretty good. All 5 of those are still probably going to make it. I had Utah at 10. I had Missouri at 11 and Liberty at 12. So those final 3 not looking great. JT, thank you so much for coming on. This video is probably way too long. It's an hour and 3 minutes, but we had a great time. I hope you did too. You got any final words for the viewers?
Yeah, man. I'm rooting for UNLV to pull off the upset over Boise State. I'm just rooting for the chaos. Like everybody's getting outraged. Who's in? Who's out? Who's this? I love the madness. You feel me? I want to see as much madness as possible. I want to see all the 2-loss SEC teams lose this week. How about we have how about we have a bunch of 9-3 SEC teams? You feel me? I want to see Penn State lose to Minnesota. I want to see Indiana beat Ohio State. I want to see as much chaos transpire with this thing as humanly possible. You feel me? Because that's what makes
I
it so
agree, and
great.
I think people are getting so caught up in this team. This is a stupid argument. We need to go to
What if
some sort
Vandy
of
beats
league.
Tennessee?
Could happen,
Could we
and
make
I
an
think
argument for a 3-loss South Carolina?
we're like one upset away from this whole thing blowing up. JT's channel will be linked in the description below. Make sure you give him a follow. You probably already do. His channel's blowing up. He's doing a lot of great stuff. Thank you so much for coming on, JT. Everyone have a happy Thanksgiving. Say hi to your family for me, and take care.